Hello.
Hello, Mrs. Joseph.
How are you? How's everybody? Welcome,
Okay,
everyone.
good so far.
Okay, great. Ezekiel?
Yes, that's me.
All right. Thanks for coming.
Okay,
Can we
welcome.
wait for another couple minutes?
Okay, no problem.
Mr. Court?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. You think we should start now because we're.
It's totally up to you. Totally up
Yeah,
to you, Susan.
I
If
think
you want
we-
to give it up, if
Yeah,
you want
I
to give it
think-
a few more minutes for some
Yeah.
additional people to join, we could do that. That's fine, man.
Yeah, let's give a couple more minutes. Yeah. Okay. Okay, folks. Okay, I think we can start now. Mr. Cox? Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Hello, everybody can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Good evening. I am filling in for Mr. Jean, who's on mission this week. So, as I say, I'm filling in for him. So once again, good afternoon and welcome everyone. And welcome Mr. Cox for coming in, for helping out with this session, webinar number 15. So I'll give a short introduction. Mr. Whyme Cox is the manager for NAWASA's Planning and Development Department, NAWASA Grenada. Mr. Cox is a civil engineer by profession. He holds a master's degree in business admin from St. George's University and a Bachelor of Science degree in civil engineering from the University of Camagüey in Cuba. He's a member of the Project Management Institute of Grenada Institute of Professional Engineer. Mr. Cox possesses a combination of engineering and project management skills acquired through professional training. For the past 18 years, Mr. Cox has dedicated his time to the field of project and construction management, specializing in structural engineering, design and detailing, and project management. He gained extensive experience occupying managerial positions in state-owned organizations, quasi-government, corporation, and private construction companies. As NAWASA's Planning and Development Manager, Mr. Cox is responsible for overseeing the implementation of all capital and infrastructure projects within the state-owned organization with an annual budget of over $15 million. I now hand you over to Mr. Cox, who will be presenting on the topic today, climate resilient water sector in Grenada. Over to you, Mr. Cox.
Thank you, Suzette, for an impressive intro. Suzanne, I know why I keep calling you Suzette, for an impressive introduction. So welcome all. Thanks for joining in. Thanks for having me to be able to just present on the climate resilient water sector in Grenada project. It is Grenada's biggest investment in the water sector in its entire history, and we'll get into that as I go through the presentation. Right, so just a brief disclaimer. This project is jointly financed by the Green Climate Fund, the German Federal Ministry for the Environment, Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety, BMUB, under its International Climate Initiative, DEC, and the Government of Grenada. It is to be implemented over 6 years by the Government of Grenada, Grenada Development Bank, ourselves here at NAWASA, and we're doing that in partnership with the German Development Corporations, GIZ. Just some further information on the project. As per finance agreement, our political counterpart for this project, somebody's not muted. I'm getting a feedback from somebody. Yeah, so our political counterpart is the Ministry of Infrastructure Development, Public Utilities, Transport and Implementation. The accredited entity for this project is GIZ. The executing entities are the Ministry of Finance, under which NAWASA falls, the Grenada Development Bank, and GIZ as well. As mentioned, the project will be implemented over 6 years. From 2019 was when we commenced, and we're aiming to complete in 2025. The budget is approximately 45.2 million euros, which is divided by 3 entities: GCF 38.4 million, BMUB 2.5, and the Government of Grenada would spend $4.2 million for the project implementation. The impacts envisaged by the project are as follows. So on completion of the implementation of the project, Grenada is expected to have a more sustainable water resource management, water savings, agriculture and the tourism sectors, water loss reduction in our distribution systems, a lot more water storage, cost reduction, and green energy and water supply systems. And of course, part of what we're doing today to be a regional frontrunner in climate resilience and in water management. All in all, the project would see a better water supply services, especially in times of drought and extreme weather events. The components of the project. The project has 5 components as outlined in the slide before you. Now, on conceptualization of the project, the intent of the project was to create a paradigm shift in water supply and climate resilience. In doing so, we identified that for that to happen, we needed to take a 3-prong approach or 4-prong approach in addressing the issues related to climate change. That being said, we identified that for any serious change to happen in anything, in any sector, there must be policies and systems in place, legislation in place to guide how things happen. And that's where the birth of component 1 came about. Similarly, we were of the view that what's the point in having new infrastructure, legislation, and people still not following them? They would, if the mindset of people is not one of conservation and resilience, then that in itself would be a challenge. So component 2 focuses on the user to create a climate resilient water user. And of course, component 3 deals with the infrastructure, making sure that all of our infrastructure has some sort of climate proofing to deal with the issues of climate change. Component 4, additional contribution to the NDCs, with the Caribbean region and the world taking a stand on climate change. We felt that the project should also be part of that. So here we look at areas as it relates to emissions reduction, and all of this I'll get into in details. And of course, we are not selfish people, so we didn't want to do all of this, spend all of this money, gain all of this experience and keep it to ourselves. So we felt that we needed a regional learning replication, which is part of what we're doing today, just telling the region, telling everybody what we've done, the issues that we've had, so that futuristically tomorrow, any of the islands having a similar project, they can reach out to us, they can rely on us and hear what are the issues, what are the challenges. So that's why we're more than happy to be here today, just to give an idea as to where we are, what's happening with the G-REWS, and how it is that we can share, relate ideas, learning as the project is being implemented. So I'm starting with component 5, and again, it's the reason why we're here today. Under component 5, the intent of the project is to do a complete analysis of all the lessons learned, development of replication models. So we want to be part of a process where we are documenting everything. So tomorrow, if anybody has a similar project, they can come to us and we could say, these are the documentation. This is how we handle this aspect of the project, that aspect of the project, as the case may be. We want to continue to do conferences, webinars, as we're doing now. And again, assist with supporting, reviewing, development of similar initiatives. If persons have something like that, come to us. We'd be more than happy to take a look at it, given our learning and experience from this project. So let's get into it. Component 1, climate resilient water governance. So as mentioned, the project felt that one of the key things that needed to happen for a project like this to be functional is that of governance. As it stands, and I'm getting into activity 1.1, Grenada water resources management in Grenada is limited to NAWASA, the water resources unit right now that Grenada has. It's large here with us in NAWASA, in fact, under my department. And what is happening with the water resources in Grenada? Because it is large with NAWASA, the data collection, data assessment is limited to the sources that NAWASA manages. That we've envisaged as a problem, because as it stands, as our demand for water across the island goes up, there is very limited data as to the other sources around the island, what are their capacities, what they can do, etc. So as it stands, if we are to do expansion on any additional source around the island, we have absolutely no data, no tracking from over the years to say, well, a particular system behave a particular way, we could take out X amount of water from it, as the case may be. We just don't have that data because of the limited nature in which water resources is managed across the island. So the project identified that. The intent is that we are going to establish a water resources management unit, separate and apart from what NAWASA does, that will not look at just the sources that NAWASA manages, but will look at every other source across the islands and gather data. So when we at NAWASA, when we're ready to do any expansion project, look at going into tap into any other additional water resource across the island, we are going to have that data and we'll be better positioned to make informed decisions in terms of what we can and cannot do. The other activity under component 1 looks at mainstreaming climate resilience in water-related sectors. There is quite a bit of limitation as it relates to how water is managed across Grenada. As it stands, one of the main objectives of the project under this particular component is to look at having legislation that would ensure that, you know, every construction project takes into consideration in a major way, in a more robust way, the impacts of climate change and how, and so that they can mitigate against these impacts during these projects. As it stands, our building codes are very limited as it relates to water management and climate resilience. So the project is working along with the stakeholders and representatives across the respective sectors to ensure that the necessary legislations are in place within our building codes, etc., to ensure that climate change is looked at in a more serious way here on the island. And then the third aspect is a climate responsive water tariff. Now, I don't know how it is in most of the islands, but water tariff here in Grenada, it's managed by the powers that be, want of a better word. In other words, to get an increase in our water rate, it's something that has to go to Parliament. So it's never an easy thing for NAWASA to get climate change, especially times like now when elections are around the corner. You know, that's a conversation you can bring to no political party or administration. So that again is something that we are mindful of, and we are playing it strategic in terms of when we are going to look at this climate responsive water tariff. But basically, what we felt was that because of the limitations that Grenada has as it relates to water supply, and just sticking a point and just moving away, just to give a little intro on NAWASA. As it stands now, NAWASA, as an organization, we manage some 30 systems, water supply systems across the island. And they range from pressure filters, or treatment system range from pressure filters to sluice and filters. And we do have a small borehole component. 95% of our water supply comes from surface water. In other words, we have wells and dams across rivers, and water comes from there. And 5% of our supply is supplied through boreholes. So every report in the past that would have looked at Grenada's vulnerability to climate change would have identified that Grenada is very vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, and of course, for the reason that that 95% of our water supply depends on river. No rain, our water availability lessens drastically. So that said, the climate responsive tariff was we basically looked at, and we probably still will do, introduce a climate tariff. In other words, during the rainy season, rain falling, we have plenty water, tariff goes down. Dry season, to control usage, we want to have that flexibility to say for the months of January to April, when we have the dry season, we want to be able to increase the tariff just to set a different mindset to the users that if you want to use more, you'll pay more. The last time we presented that to the powers that be, it was a definite no-no, but we believe that it's one of the ways that we're going to control what happens in terms of our water usage and making us more climate resilient. So that's component one in a nutshell. Just to break it down in terms of the objectives and the status of where we are. Again, the objective, we want to create that water resources management unit. Currently, we've gotten approved a water policy, the structure of what the water resources management unit would look like. That has also already been identified, and from regional synergies, the consultants and so who would have worked on this under the establishment of the water resources management unit would have looked at examples in the region, and they would have been touching base with some of the organizations in the regions to find out from them what is working, what is not working, and vice versa. Our intent is to, once we implement, note what are the pros, the cons, what is working for us, what is not working for us, so we could continue to, have that regional synergy and make sure that whenever another water resources management unit is established in any one of our countries, we are going to have it, taking into consideration the positives and the negatives of the implementation from the respective islands, including ourselves that are doing it now. Just to identify some of the challenges that we're having with the establishment of the unit already. The issue of where the unit sits is more and more of a conversation. Is something that I believe that we've identified that we are going to have it under our PERC, who is our Public Regulatory Commission. That's what we're thinking. The tug of war between whether it should stay in NAWASA, whether it should be in agriculture, went on for quite some time. Clearly, we believe if you put it in agriculture, then the concentration would be on agriculture. Agriculture is of the view if it stays in NAWASA, the concentration would remain on what NAWASA is extracting, and so on and so forth. So again, once all of these rationales are cleared out, we'll be more than happy to come back around the table and share, why we do what we do after having all of the discussions and so on. As I mentioned on the second part of it, which the policies, and so we are trying to make sure that rainwater harvesting is something that is part of our building codes. If you look at Grenada now, most of the houses that you see, they are built and the spouting goes into the drain. So when rain falls, everything goes to waste. We are trying to make sure that, at least when you build a house, you build a building, you must have water storage, and the physical planning unit has started implementing that already, not in a mandatory way, because there is no actual legislation to guide that. They are just doing it from a sort of ad hoc standpoint in the meantime. So the project want to make sure that all of these bills and so get on the way and get going. And of course, I mentioned the water tariff is something. Luckily for us, in 2019, the government had approved a water tariff increase for Grenada after 10 years. So this component of the project, looking at the climate smart tariff, we are going to try to bring that back to the fore more at the end of the project, 25, 26, to see if we get some traction from the politicians. So that's component one for you. As I mentioned, component two, we focus on the resilient water user. This component was a bit, tricky. We tried to show the donors that while we targeting climate resilience, we are doing it by partnerships and initiatives that are going to be beneficial, and person who could afford to pay to do better we want to encourage them to do so. So that gave birth to the Challenge Fund for tourism investments and agriculture investment. What it was, it was simple. We said because these are mainly commercial entities, people who are investing to make money, the project said, hey, we can't just give you money to make so that you can make more money, but we can assist. So we've identified that for the projects that would enable resilience and water saving, the project was going to meet them on the half. So hotels, for example, we encourage them to install water saving taps, toilets, etc. And if they're through an assessment process, once they qualify and they meet all of the requirements, if a project to change out all of the units and so come up to $100,000 overall, the project is going to put $50,000, and these commercial entities would have to put in $50,000, just from an exemplary standpoint. So this component of the project is managed by our Grenada Development Bank, and for obvious reason, the bank can also assist the participants who might be needing some capital support here and there through soft loans, etc., so that the project can meet its deliverables in terms of making sure that persons are able to come up with that 50%. And so to date, we had quite a bit of traction on that. A lot of hotels came onto it. So that is a component that is going quite well. And again, we're happy to present the models so that you all could see what would have transpired here in the event that anybody has to or wants to implement a similar type of approach to getting these sectors moving in a direction where they can be resilient to the impacts of climate change and be more conservative in terms of water usage. Activity 2.2, awareness. Again, as I mentioned, we want to create a shift in the thinking, in the mindset of people. So this component we are talking about, awareness campaign from the beginning of the project to the end of the project, depending on which activities we are concentrating on more. You would see more campaigns in those directions. But the intent is to, once you here on island, every bus that drive by, every vehicle that stop, every time you turn on the radio, you want to hear something about be climate smart, save water, etc., etc. So that's the how we are intending to treat component 3, and a lot of these activities, component 2, and a lot of these activities are already on the way. Where are we to date? The objective, as I mentioned, is water efficient solutions in agriculture and tourism, and awareness on the other side. Our status, we have a couple of hotels who've already installed devices and rainwater harvesting facilities. So the project also is assisting in rainwater harvesting facilities. So if a hotel or a farmer wants to install new tanks, cisterns, etc., the project would assess. And again, once the requirements are met, we are going to facilitate them with half of the investments. Just to note that we also introduced some flexibility in the project, just to make sure that the project meets its overall objective. There were instances when with identified farmers, for example, farmers are always, there are bigger farmers and smaller farmers, so to not create segregation. The project would have in a number of instance, moved the goalpost a little bit and allowed for 75% financing in some cases, after a thorough assessment of the particular farmer or farmer's position. So a lot has been happening and shifts has been going on as it relates. Just make sure that the project hit its deliverables and hit those and that Grenada at the end of the day get those impacts. Again, for the purpose of the awareness, we've already run a CAP survey to get an appreciation as to how much people, what Grenadians know about conservation, what Grenadians know about climate change. And then from that survey is where we started, based on the gaps that we've seen, we've started the respective campaign ideas and campaign drives where the gaps are widest. So to date, if you come to Grenada now, you'll notice a lot of our buses. We're running some ads on TV already about conservation and stuff like that. So and a number more initiatives that we have in planning that, as I mentioned, we're going to be releasing as the project evolves. And again, from synergies, one of the activities under the solutions for the agriculture and tourism sectors, we had to do water auditing. We had consultants coming up with design solutions and taking into consideration innovative practices as it relates to tourism and agriculture. For in the case of agriculture, irrigation, look at what's trending on the market now and creating these audits. So we are happy to share how these things were done with the region. If anybody has anything similar, reach out to us. We've been more than happy to share what would have transpired there. And again, we want this to be a two-way. We're doing PR. We know most of the entities across the region would be into some type of PR. We'd be happy to share what we intend to do and get comments back from you all and vice versa. If you're thinking of anything along them lines, we'd be more than happy to have the conversation with you all and just express what we intend to do. And then now we move on to component 3, which is the climate resilient water supply system. Again, this component is the biggest component from that $45 million budget, and for obvious reasons, we're talking about infrastructure. Infrastructure is not cheap. So it accounts for some 22 million out of the 45 million. That's divided across the five components. So most of the investment comes here. And here, this particular component is implemented directly by NAWASA. We're basically spearheading what happened with the investments as relates to infrastructure. And of course, for obvious reasons, we own everything from tanks, pipes, and we know where the issues are. So 3.1, we're looking at additional storage. When our dams and some of our systems were constructed 40 years ago, while there were some level of foresight, the rate of development that Grenada has seen has left us on the starting blocks. We're talking about, in today's day, we still have systems that only have 100,000 gallons of clear well storage. If for some reason you have an issue that you have to shut a plant down, that 100,000 gallons would last an hour, and thousands would be affected. So in recent time, we've been benchmarking ourselves as an organization to ensure that whatever we do, whenever there is a system breakdown, we want to have it back up and running within 3 days. So that said, because of our lack thereof and limitations as it relates to water storage, we are consistently encouraging customers that they should have backup storage to last them at least 3 days. The recent rhetoric on one of the talk shows was, NAWASA is always reminding us to have 3 days storage, but they only have 1 hour. So, these sort of things is what we get. So identifying that under the project, we said, hey, if we're gonna be climate resilient, we have to address all of these matters. So the project is envisaged to install 16 tanks across the island, and we're gonna range them from 50,000 gallons. The 50,000 gallon tanks goes on our sister island of Carriacou. Clearly, it's a much smaller population over there. So the distribution is much smaller and goes up to 500,000 gallons for some of the higher demand areas here on the island. And they're going to be dispersed from St. George's in the south, to St. Patrick's in the south. Those systems. We're looking at raw water storage. The eastern side of the island suffers tremendously from the dry season. Our rivers and watershed on that side of the island, they're very vulnerable to the dry season. They go super low, and clearly we cannot meet the demand on that and certain areas once the dry season hit. And clearly our solution is valve regulation. Something that we're doing all we can, or we hope we're aiming that this project would assist tremendously on with the interventions in our raw water storage capability on that side of the island. Initially would have envisaged the installation of some new dams and retrofitting of some dams that we looked at on a feasibility stage with that. We may do some changes here and there in terms of the solution, but yeah, we're looking majorly at the raw water storage aspect in those areas. And then the groundwater, as I mentioned, 5% of our water supply comes from groundwater that's along our southeast coast. And these borehole system, they're our lifeline during the dry season, because the demand does only one thing during the dry season. It goes up. With less water, more demand. So as an organization, every little area that you could pull water from, we try to tap into them. But what's happening with our groundwater resources? As it stands now, we have absolutely no monitoring of our groundwater resources. We have to date 2 or 3 boreholes that we just stopped using already, because as we continue to pull from them with the lack thereof of monitoring, when you do your water quality checks, you just notice that the salt content, salinity levels are above normal for potable distribution. So you just shut them down with some anticipation that some sort of recharge is going to take place. But again, we're in 2022, where we don't want to be, assuming. So the project is going to assist us with the installation of monitoring systems for these groundwater. We're going to be drilling some new wells to monitor what is happening with these aquifers, so we can be, on top of how we treat them, and make sure that we don't get to a stage as with the other boreholes that we just had to stop pulling from them. Clearly, with all of these new infrastructure that we're putting in, I did mention pipelines. In addition to the storage tanks, a number of our pipe network, we are looking at some 30 kilometers or 50 kilometers of pipeline to change out across the island as well. So, as I was saying, with all of this new infrastructure that we intend to install over the next couple of years, the project felt that we need to, make sure that we have systems in place to ensure that maintenance is up to par, so we don't have the issues that we're having now, where there isn't a formal maintenance plan in place, and stuff is done more on an ad hoc basis when somebody remember a PRV wasn't or a PRV start malfunctioning, then somebody reach out and say, oh, let's check it, when there should be a systematic maintenance for these things. So the project has identified that, and we are going to have a plan to ensure that the entire infrastructure system that NAWASA has a formal and structured maintenance plan. We are going to also do some investments in communal rainwater harvesting systems across our rural areas and our sister isle of Carriacou. There are a number of existing tanks, and so that because of again, they would have started to have leaks and lack of investments from government and communities. These tanks are just sitting there with massive potential for storage. So we've identified a couple of these tanks that we could repair, restore, and use as rainwater harvesting system, capture all of the rainwater as alternative ways to ensure that we have water stored and we could respond in the event of a climate event. The project, because we're looking at climate resilience, we did not leave out the medical sector. As it stands now, a number of our health facilities across the island, they do not have backup systems, and if they do have, it's tanks that are just out in the wind. And if we're in the middle of a hurricane, and we've experienced the Ivans and the Emily, so we know clearly what we're referring to. The project felt that for these centers, we need to have backup systems on them, that in the event that there is some landslide, some issue that may or would have impacted NAWASA's supply to them, they can still function for a period of time, because they would have these backup systems on them. And the intent is to have them fortified in a way that, given a hurricane or some type of extreme event like that, these tanks would not go, they'll stay and remain, so that whenever that system passes, the medical centers and so can come back on stream as fast as they can. Similarly, so again, as I mentioned, most of our water supply is from rivers, etc. The challenges that we have now, or one of the challenges that we have now, is that when it rains heavy, we have dam siltation, and again, you have to shut down plants to clear dam, etc. And again, creating interruption in your supply system. So oftentimes you hear people say, well, rainfall in NAWASA, you all have issues. Rain not falling, you all still have issues. So what is this? Again, we've identified that, and again, we've looked at some interventions in terms of how we could, better and lessen on these dam siltations, etc. During these events. Again, it's 2022, SCADA control, SCADA system. We believe that at this stage, or the stage that we want to get at as an organization, is where I can sit in a room and just look at the computer screen with all of my plants before me, and by the touch of a button, we can turn off valves, turn them back on. This would allow us, in the time of hurricane warning, etc., we could have water on for minutes before impact. And of course, once we're back online, we could see if we have any impacts and turn on systems again right after the event. And again, lessening or making us more fortified and more resilient to these climate response. And of course, as I was just pointing out, that will be part of an emergency response plan in terms of what happens when there is a warning, what happens when there is a landslide, etc., as we go forward. So that's what we intend to do on the component 3. Again, here we have quite a bit of purchasing, quite a bit of procurement, etc. across for the region. Reach out to us. Here, this is where I believe that once we would have get our goods and so on island, persons can reach out and say, Cox, you all bought pipe from the particular supplier. What was the experience? Is it good? Is it bad? I believe that these sort of information we could share, just so that, as a region, if we see trouble, we've had an issue with a particular thing or a particular supplier, I wouldn't want any of the other islands to go through the same issue. So we'd be more than happy again, guys, to, once these things start to roll out, to share with you all what those issues are. So again, in terms of where we are, we've divided the tank installation and pipe installation into 2 groups, somewhat so just so that it can be more manageable. And again, there is still some issues in terms of land acquisition, etc., for some of the tank locations, and so that we've identified that we are dealing with. So in the interest of time, those that we had the all clear on, we put those as a group 1. To date, we've completed most of the preliminary designs. We're in the process now of commencing our goods procurement for those group one tanks. And of course, we've also started the conversation with SCADA, all the other interventions for those group one projects. So that is moving along nicely. Time-wise, we looking good. We were worried about the Ukraine situation, still a bit worried. So we'll see how that is impacting the project. Thus far, some of the numbers that we've seen from a financial side still looking probable. We haven't seen major increases thus far, which is a good sign, and it's one of the risks that we would have identified, because clearly when this project was conceptualized, there wasn't any issues with supply chain, etc. So one of the bigger risks that we have identified to date, especially with this component 3 that requires a major amount of procurement and dependability and supply chain, etc., etc. Good. So that's component 3. So component 4, as we'd mentioned, we're looking at additional contribution to Grenada's NDCs. And so here we look at emissions as it relates to NAWASA. We just did an evaluation of, all our energy consumption and try to benchmark the type of emissions that the organization would have, and how what sort of interventions we could implement to lessen on that. It also involved the implementation of a water loss reduction strategy. This again is of critical importance. As it stands now, Grenada, NAWASA's NRW on non-revenue water stands anywhere between 30% overall. Now, most regions may say that is not bad, but it's not bad when you have plenty water. For us, it's terrible, because if you are losing 30% of what you are producing and persons are complaining that they don't have water, then you're not in a good position. So we've identified that is one of the things that we need to address, and address fast. And we are looking to address that through the implementation of GIS technology, looking at better management of our DMAs, etc. As a project evolves. So again, that is one of the things that we also have commenced. looking at that. And additional to that, we want to introduce technology, looking at, system for integration of our operations from the time a work order is created. We want that process to be a seamless process across the organization, and not system as we have now, where when a work order is created, sometimes it takes 2 or 3 days to get to our transmission and distribution team who would address it. Now, when you have big breaks and big bus, etc., it becomes emergencies, and we will move on them immediately. Notwithstanding when you have the small ones, which are still throwing out 10, 15 gallons a minute, because it is not life or death, and because of the amount that you have to manage as a transmission and distribution, you find that sometimes 3 days a week, sometimes a month, you hear somebody say, hey, we saw this leak here and it's been going on for a month. So we want to, through GIS tracking, GIS monitoring, see how best we could identify, map, track all of these leaks, so we can, better appreciate what is happening with the network. We're also planning to have instrumentation consistently on the network to do water balancing through the identification of an establishment of DMAs. So we're going to have, for every DMA, have a bulk meter or log or something telling us what flows, what pressures, what is happening on the network, and keep a track and do comparisons, water balances compared to the users in the area. So if there's any leak, we could identify those through all of these processes, all of these intervention. I should probably speed up because time is going faster than I'm anticipating. And again, guys, here we would be more than happy to share again what we would have done. We have some consultants assisting us with some of these, and they have been reaching out to organizations like yours, just trying to get an appreciation as to how organizations across the regions are as it relates to their mapping and their GIS and so on and so on and so forth, so that we could implement similar strategies and so on and so forth. One of the separate and apart from G-REWS, one of the initiatives that NAWASA is looking at now, we're still a very manual organization from the standpoint that meter readers still go out and read meters manually. We're still using mechanical type meters with rings and cogs, and as a result of that, we have quite a bit of investment that goes into these meter changing, and so every month we change out anywhere between 200 and 300 meters. And if you do a cost analysis of that, it's one of the things that we've identified that is impacting the organization because of the amount of meters that we change now. While a lot of them is old meters that would have been in the ground for 4 or 5 years already, we're still not getting the life expectancy from these meters. So it's not a good thing for the organization. So we are heavily looking into the smart metering, the introduction of the ultrasonic type metering that again would assist with more direct monitoring of the systems, and assist us also with our water loss reduction campaign. So again, guys, we'll be reaching out, and we know quite a bit of the organizations across the region has already have these deployed. So consultants would be coming asking questions in terms of what's happening, what's functioning. So we can be guided along our path, and of course, once we implement, guys, we'll be more than ready to share what those reports are, what the findings are, etc. And we're sure that this is just one of many of these webinars that we're going to have, but feel free to reach out to us at any point in time for any assistance, because we'll definitely be reaching out to you all. And again, guys, I wouldn't spend a lot of time on this. We just throw in here some of the examples that that might be relevant to the other utilities across the region. Climate proofing, just showing a slide here just to show what are the implications of not climate proofing and how we would have gone about our climate proofing exercise. We started off with an assessment. We included of the key stakeholders as it relates to water, and just hear from them, what challenges from there would have come up with a guide and the different measures, and so identify risk, likelihood, do the assessment, apply the measures, and of course we're monitoring, and the feedback we are going to take note, and in our component 2 or component 1, make sure that these findings and feedback get into policy making, so this concept can continue across the island and maintain itself in a policy and legislative way. Here we've identified some of the more impacts that happens on our water services, and some of the responses that we would apply or are going to apply to these impacts as we see them. So intense rainfall, again, this one is probably one of our biggest challenges. Again, all of 95% of our water supply is surface water. Rainfalls is always an issue for us. While we have more water, there is also a lot of issues as it relates to turbidity. So again, we've identified all of these things and looking at how we can better, have solutions towards them. Not going to spend a lot of time on these slides. We are going to share the presentation, and again, one-on-one. You all could always come back with anything different that you see on here. Here again, one of the things that we're looking at, that where we have in river crossings, we want to, as best we can, go across the riverbed and not have them above rivers, above bridges, etc. Save and accept that we know for a fact that we don't have a choice, and we know for a fact that our bridges can in fact withstand what nature might throw at it. So some of the considerations that we've already given to these interventions, the GIS and NRW spoke a little bit about that earlier in terms of our interventions. Here we are putting out a lot of investments in making sure that our infrastructure is properly mapped, and that the mapping continue on a daily basis. The intent here is to ensure that all of our technicians, everybody who has interaction with the system, anything happens on the system, that once they are out there, they would have a tablet. So if we install a new half-inch line from point A to B, we want to track that. We install new mains, we want to track that. There's a leak in the system, we want to track that. We change out the PRV, we want to track when we change it out. So all of that can be in that comprehensive GIS database, so that when it's time to do assessment, monitoring, making decisions, we could do so from an informed standpoint. And as I mentioned, in terms of our work processes, we want to just make sure that we get into the technology. One of the things that we're seeing, and we're hoping that as a region we could probably address, is that of the way the wall of IT is going from the standpoint of subscriptions. NAWASA as a small organization, our customer base is 40,000, just about 40,000 customers. And when you have to invest in IT platforms that are running you $500,000 for installation, and then hundreds of thousands of dollars in subscriptions on an annual basis, it begs whether you could actually do it, especially when your hands are tied from a tariff standpoint. So it's one of the things that we believe that as a region we could attack. Going as a region in terms of these IT investments and not the individual organization. So that's something that would be happy for CAWASA to champion and get us involved, because it's one of the things that we are seeing now that we are implementing is that there are a lot of systems out there, but because when you're a small utility, it becomes a challenge because, the wider wall, 40,000 customer is just manzana, one block in some areas. So, that's one of the challenges that we see. So that is what I was referring to a while ago, the IT software issue on this slide. So guys, there we have it. I believe on the call, we have some of the team from GIZ. So I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you have at this time. If I can answer them, my colleagues would probably chip in on some of the areas that they are in fact I'm dealing with. So feel free, guys. Suzanne, back to you. That's it from us here in terms of what's happening on G-REWS and how we see that we can partner in the coming months.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Cox, for this comprehensive review on this project component. Now we'll ask persons if they have any questions or if they want any clarification. As you said yourself or the team, they'll be able to respond. So folks, feel free to ask questions if you have any. There is a question from Ezekiel Francis.
Yeah, so
you saw that.
I'm looking at Ezekiel's question in the chat. The response from the public, Ezekiel, is never a favorable one as it relates to tariff increases. So we have that challenge. But while there are persons who would always oppose increases, there are a lot of Grenadians who believe that our water tariff is just way too cheap when they see what their bills are and the usage. So again, the intent here is to man this or mitigate against this through a massive awareness campaign, show what is happening, identify where the issues are, and let people know that it's the only how we can deal with the issues of shortages and stuff like that they're having now, is if we have more and people can solve more. It means that all of us would eventually have more to use before we start running into shortages, etc.
Yeah, there's another question, observation from Jamal Howell. How far along are you with your SCADA procurement?
This SCADA is at what stage? We're still doing the assessment of how it's going to be done. Just today, there was a discussion on whether the communication system is going to be one of radio or satellite or cellular. These sort of conversation, and then the assessment is now ongoing on the existing infrastructure that we have. How are they in terms of their SCADA capabilities? The initial assessment is showing that NAWASA would require massive intervention in terms of changing out panels into the PLSs and so on. Those panels that have capability to actually speak to some type of communication. As it stands now, it's not the case. So we're anticipating that the investment here is going to be a major one, but we are poised on getting it because of how critical we believe it is for our mitigation against climate change impacts.
Okay, any more questions?
Suzanne, I've got my hand up because I've got a really, really interesting presentation. Thank you very much. I found it very interesting. I have a number of sort of comments and questions. Are you using district metered areas? How far are you along that right now?
Well, NAWASA has always had DMAs. Currently, we have some 70 DMAs. So we have bulk meters already installed on a number of our areas. What we're just fortifying now is, doing a water balance concept, so we can make that DMA process, DMA assessment more seamless and more accurate.
Yeah, because I'm working on a project in Haiti, and we did a training there. I'm with Operators Without Borders, and we did a training there on district metered areas, and they were at 90% leakage, and they have found just using the district metered areas to shut off the systems one by one, it has just made an incredible difference.
Indeed.
I'm going to have them come and do a case study on this for one of the webinars.
Not a problem.
Another thing you talked about SOPs, and with Operators Without Borders, we will be releasing about over 200 SOPs for almost everything in the utility and laboratory as well, free of charge to everybody through CAWASA in the next couple of months.
Good.
So any of the utilities that want to take anything that's there, they can take it, and then our team who put these together is very willing to help you customize them for your individual utilities.
Okay.
So have a look out for that.
Okay.
And one thing, when you said on the, somebody, I think Ezekiel asked, or somebody about the water tariff response to the public. I don't necessarily agree that the public is always opposed. When we were working with the people in St. Lucia, we put in there was a new plant out at Dennery, and half of the people got water and half of them had to wait. And so they had increases in their they were metered, they were paying more. We did a town hall meeting, and we did a survey of people, and the people who had got this water said they did not mind paying for the water. They said, we're getting water, we're happy. What we want is, if you're going to raise the prices, raise the service level. And if you have a communication plan that is really robust and isn't just when you're bringing in a climate or a tariff review, because that's always suspicious. If you have this ongoing, and I know Dominica has been doing this very successfully, you don't have as much pushback from the public as you would normally do. So I'll just make those comments. One other thing, on the remote monitoring, we had a presentation recently on the Wednesday webinars from Sentry, and they have one of probably the top remote monitoring systems that are not as expensive. So you might want to get a hold of that presentation and just listen to what they're doing, because it's one of the better ones we've seen in the world.
Okay, perfect.
So it might be an opportunity to look at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, Valerie. Any other questions? Anything more to clarify?
Suzanne, it wouldn't be a Wednesday webinar if Ezekiel and I didn't have a question.
I know, and that's great. That's great. Okay, I may add also that I heard of Mr. Cox, your offer to the participants, so you can share with them your experiences.
Indeed.
In that project. So I think it's a good offer, and then they should take it up as it relates to the project. So yeah, so I would imagine they would you would assist them if they need any help with regards to your project. Yeah,
definitely.
Great.
Perhaps you could put your email address in the chat so everybody has it. Might be.
We'll do that now.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Everyone got this? All right. So I wish to thank you again, Mr. Cox, for this great presentation. I wish to thank everybody, all the participants, and of course, you'll be getting the recording. And we can also share your presentation, Mr. Cox.
Yes, definitely.
Great.
Definitely.
Great.
I'll send it to you, Suzanne, and you could distribute it.
Yes, please.
I believe you have a wider.
Yes. Great.
connection.
Yeah. I would appreciate that. Thank you again. Thank you. Thank everybody for
Thanks,
your
guys.
participation. Thank you.
Thanks,
Mr.
guys.
Cox.
Cheers.
All right.
No problem. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.